But let's say that you toil, and you toil and you toil to get the light and shade right, to hold the F, to get all the embellishments right, even though you really don't, right? Because you're not in the position to do that, but you're working on the embellishments and the expression, the embellishments and the expression. And what happens to your pipe band at the end of the year? You get the upgrade, don't you? No, you
Nope.
don't. You struggled all year and you didn't get it. And that sucks. And that's
Yeah.
lame. Morning, Jim.
Morning, Andrew.
It's a big day today.
Big day.
Big day.
Been hurtling toward this day since the beginning.
Unless we're going to do a brief episode on the conclusion of the book.
That's maybe actually a good idea. Never mind. It's not a big day.
Well,
It's
or
not
we
even
could
big.
do it, or maybe we could tack it on. Maybe we could tack it on to today's discussion and just tie this thing up in a bow.
There you go. We could just maybe we see how the discussion of chapter 12 goes, and then maybe we just plow on through to the conclusion and say, hey, now you don't have to buy the book because we've talked through the whole thing in the podcast.
Yes, indeed.
That's been the goal all along, huh? Self-sabotage there. You don't want to sell more copies, do you?
How are your arms this week, by the way? Are you feeling
So much better?
So much.
I get dressed by myself. I wash my own hair. It's really been great.
Nice. Congratulations. Well, Jim, this is your moment. Guide us through chapter 12, and then I will provide color commentary.
Yeah. Let your drops of wisdom distill upon the conversation as we go along, please.
I'll
yes.
try.
So opening with, and I tried to go with a kind of flowery little paragraph there just because we're opening with a quote from Terry Pratchett, a well-known author. And Terry Pratchett says this. Here's what Terry Pratchett says. And the funny thing was that people who weren't entirely certain they were right always argued much louder than other people, as if the main person they were trying to convince were themselves.
Yeah, poignant. Very timely.
It seems like a pretty solid idea. I am reminded of an experience I had once when I met, and this sounds kind of like a fable, and so maybe it's very fitting, but I was in a small village in Mexico, and this wise old lady who had never learned to read, never went to any formal schooling or anything like that, was just like this fisher lady who had a lot of wisdom. She said something to me that was something to the same effect. She said something like,
"This sounds
I
fake.
know.
Are you reading this off an
so
AI-generated script here?
I know, right? No, if I swear, this is real. And she said to me something like, when somebody tells me something over and over and over again, I know not to believe it because they're trying to convince themselves that it's true.
Yes.
But when someone tells me something once and never mentions it again, I know that's solid. You know, they really mean it because they don't need to convince themselves.
There you go.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, or if they say it, especially if they say it the exact same way over and over again.
Could be.
It's like, wait a minute. That can't be
so
right.
Maybe I know an annoying piper who's always like, it has to be a heavy D throw. The only D throw that matters is the heavy D throw. Light D throws aren't real D throws.
Well, and this is I mean, I don't know what to compare this to in the world, but yeah, the D throw thing is hilarious, right? So the D throw thing, it had to be heavy. Do you remember that? It just had to be heavy.
I was
then
definitely
2 or 3
one of those, yeah.
And then you hear it like from 1 or 2 or 3 famous pipers like, oh, I play the light D throw. And then the whole world should then play a light D throw.
Mm.
And then suddenly 1 or 2 pipers they're playing heavy. So then the whole world should switch to heavy, right? Like this is obviously absolute silliness, right? It's absolute silliness.
Silly, yes.
Yes. The style of D throw you play doesn't matter. Just doesn't. The light D throw is better, right, Jim? Right?
Personally, having spent many years playing the heavy and just a couple years now playing the light, I think the light's better. I can get it to fit into music way better personally.
It just is. I know the light D throw is better. And I've thought this through and I've tried it all the different ways I can. And the light D throw is the best. That's the one you should play. But see, Jim, that's just my opinion. And honestly, if someone wants to play a heavy D throw, that doesn't bother me in the slightest. It doesn't mean that person's not on my team. It doesn't mean that person's wrong. It just means they play the heavy D throw. Now, another hot take, okay, is what you usually hear, which, by the way, we've done this hot take before. But what you usually hear is the steaming pile D throw, right? Which is sort of like a totally anti-musical ball of stuff that's
Yeah,
not
it's
very
not
good.
heavy, it's not light, it's just a
It's
mess.
not heavy, it's not light, it's just a mess. And then usually people call that a heavy deep throw, but it's not. That's a crappy deep throw. So
Oh,
there's the heavy, there's the light. And by the way, there's other styles too. I feel like there's the grip style deep throw that you sometimes hear,
is that on purpose
especially.
though? Because for
Well,
me,
it
that's
might
happened
be.
by accident.
And then if it's on purpose, that's good. And if it's not on purpose, that's bad, generally
Mm,
speaking. And that comes from a place of, you know, method. If I'm going to play something, I want it to be what I intended to play. Have we
mm.
done have I told you about, I think I have. See, Jim, we've done episodes so much, but let's review my brother-in-law's system of scoring golf. Have I told you about this?
I remember you telling me that, oh, what was it? It was if you, sometimes he plays differently to just see if he can get the
Yes.
exact, yeah, rather than like necessarily playing to win, it's can I do what I meant to, what I set out to
Yes.
do?
It's almost like the difference between solo competition and the bagpipe freedom process. This is the divide between the two. So you can play golf and then you can go for your lowest score that you can get, right? And that's one way of playing golf. But another way of playing golf is the highest score you can get, where you only count shots that went as you intended them to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And that's a fascinating way to play golf. So, yeah, I got a 6 on that hole, but how many of my shots actually went the way I wanted them to go? For example, I'm going to hit my 9-iron and I'm intending it to, go up in the air. And I don't know what other characteristics of a good shot you might have, like not a huge divot, right?
Hmm.
We don't want to skip it off the ground. We want it to go nice and high up in the air and we want it to land, somewhere on the green, kind of on the high side of the pin, or maybe on the low side of the pin would be better, right? Something like that. And that's my intention. And so if you hit the ball and that's roughly what happens, you get a point. But then if you hit the ball and it's not what happens, you don't get a point. Even if you end up getting a birdie on that hole, your actual intention score might be quite low.
Hmm.
Or you know what I mean? And then it's the
Yeah.
same. And then what we're talking about reminds me of that. It's not whether you play heavy or light that's important. What's important is that what you are intending is what's coming out. You're manifesting your intention out
Hmm.
into the real world. That's the real thing. I think that's I don't know. It's like the measure of your creativity or something, of the quality of it,
Yeah.
is
I
whether or
wonder if
not what
it's,
you intend actually happens.
yeah, it reminds me of when I was a kid playing horse with my friends, the basketball game
Yeah.
horse where you spell out the word.
That's a
And
great
how,
game for practicing manifesting your intention, isn't it?
yes, we had to make a rule for ourselves after a little while because we fell into this trap of being like, you do something maybe kind of wild, and if it happens to work out, then you say, okay, to make my shot, you have to do everything I just did. That means
No,
it has to
you got to
bounce off
call
of
it
that
ahead of
wall.
time.
And yeah, exactly. We had to make that rule for ourselves. Nope, you got to call everything ahead of time. Which foot are you jumping off of? Anything you want to be included in the shot, you got to
Yeah.
call it ahead of time.
You got to call it ahead of time. Do you ever do that when you're playing pool too? The last shot, when you sink the 8-ball, you have to call the pocket.
Yeah.
You can win on a BS shot, right? You can miss the intended shot and then it bounces off 3 balls and goes into some random pocket, but it doesn't count. As a matter of fact, now if I'm remembering correctly, because I haven't played pool in quite a while, there's no point playing pool with my friends because they're all like top pipers and they're all coincidentally or not coincidentally like super competitive pool players. Super
Interesting.
annoying. So I've had to kind of step back. What was I talking about though? Yeah. So if I remember correctly, if you call the pocket wrong on the 8-ball and it goes in a different pocket, I think you lose.
Them's
Which is
Queensbury
a great
there.
rule. Which is a great rule. And it just, I don't know, it points towards like intention being the real measure of what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, not to overload this with connections and metaphors, but just last night I was listening to 2 of my children playing Dungeons and Dragons, and one of them, well, it's like a D&D light for kids, and so there are cards involved, and one of them kept rolling their die and then deciding which weapon they were going to use based on that roll, and the other one was trying to explain to them, no, you've got to decide which weapon you're using first.
Yeah.
Then roll and kind of see how that goes.
That always works well when kids try to explain to each other that they're not understanding the rules correctly.
Oh man, yeah, it was a rough night. Lots of fighting. So
Yeah.
sometimes, though, you mentioned in the chapter here that you seem to encounter time and again a certain kind of exception, an expectation that there be an exception for
Yeah.
me.
Because you've been
The
doing this a very long time. So you deserve exemptions.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, but in my situation, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The words that you put into the ethereal, not kind of exemplar person here is, I know I need to improve my playing to be a better piper, but my pipe major wants me to learn all the band tunes with full embellishments for our competition season. So I won't be
Yes.
able to do all of this resetting stuff with the limited time I have.
I know. It's the age-old problem. And yeah,
I've been in that
have fun
situation
with that.
myself. I've thought that to myself too. Like, okay,
I'm in
I'm
that
going to get
situation.
better later.
I,
I'll do it this
I'm in that
winter.
situation daily with my diet. It's like, well,
Mm,
I can't really start my diet now because I'm going to Scotland in like a week. And
mm,
it's impossible to eat healthy when you're in Scotland.
mm.
And then I'll be home. And by the way, my summer is like totally crazy this year. So then I'll be home for a week and then back to Scotland with the whole family this year. But like, I just can't really start eating healthy, I guess, till September.
And then it's like new me in September. And it's like, but then the holidays start.
Well, but then September in our family, we have birthdays like all month. My dad's birthday, my daughter's birthday, my birthday. I feel like there's someone else's birthday. So you're
Some
having all
cake.
like the birthday parties and the cake and the special
Mm.
birthday dinners, and then you got leftovers from the dinners. So I guess I'm not going to be eating all that healthy in September, but maybe in October. I feel like, yeah, October, that's going to be the time where I'm going to eat really healthy. But then what happens in October is you get
Halloween
COVID.
parties, man.
Yeah, you get COVID or something though.
Oh,
Something
that
comes
too,
up
yeah.
and then you get COVID or you get sick or you have a cold or I don't know, or your wife does. And so you're eating comfort food or your kids, I don't know, someone does something and then you're totally distracted and you don't have the bandwidth to eat healthy in October. But then obviously November's not going to work
November's
because
right out. Never
no,
an
because that's
option.
like Thanksgiving. I think we
Yeah.
have a few. And then December is another birthday month in my family. So you have birthdays the whole month of December, which means like you're going to be eating a lot of cake and ice cream. And if you're going to eat a lot of cake and ice cream on the weekends, there's no real point eating healthy during the week because it's just going to be destroyed on the weekend. So
Mhm,
let's not,
mhm.
I mean, and then obviously the last week of December is out. And then January's New Year's resolution. But you know what, Jim? I actually usually delay my New Year's resolution till February because
Me
January
too.
is like Kansas City week, right? So you end up off in Kansas City with the piping and there's tons of barbecue there. So you're not going to start the diet right in January rather.
So
January is
new
really
me
not
in
going to work.
February.
Yeah, but I really do feel like February, that could be my month.
Yeah. So until then, grab another bag of Doritos.
Yeah, so February is how many months from the date this is being recorded, which happens to be July 16th. So that's, more than half a year away. In about half a year, trust me, bro, I'm going to start my diet. But it's the same with piping though, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that was about diet, but it's the same.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm not going to, I can't simplify my tunes today because Glasgowland's coming up this weekend, but maybe after Glasgowland's, but no, that's not really going to quite work because then Maxville's coming up and then whatever. And then really, frankly, I guess maybe during August, but man, it's like boat season. I'm going to be out on the boat. So I'm not going to be simplifying my tunes then and doing the piping stuff I know I should be doing then. So like, why don't we go back with September? But frankly, September, I like to take a break from piping a little bit and just cool the jets and focus. The kids are going back to school and, everything's and there's some new shows coming on. Outlander, second half of season, whatever's coming on. So probably work on that. Outlander, amazing show. Love it. It's going to be crazy. So then maybe October. Yeah, we'll get down to simplifying the tunes during October. But, then the band drops all the new tunes for next year in October. So I'm probably going to be focusing on learning them, right?
Right.
So then maybe November is good. But then Thanksgiving comes in November. A lot of family coming over. Okay, maybe December, but that's the holidays. So yeah, we're already on to January, right? Before you can start simplifying your bagpipe tunes.
And then it's crunch time already because the band's getting together to play the new set. You can't be simplifying them when you're going to play with the band.
Yep. This is one of those things, right? And we've talked about this several times, but I always insist that practice should be very short, right? Any practice anyone does, your plan is for that practice to be short, right? Because long practice, it doesn't work. I mean, maybe when you're retired, you can venture towards slightly medium length practices. Or I also understand if you're a professional, right? I'm assuming when Glenn Brown prepares for the medals, he can't afford for his practice to be really short, but I guarantee you it's not really long. It's probably medium at most because life is really crazy and it takes a lot of willpower and focus to do real practice. And so we need to plan for it to be very short. For me, I need it to be early in the day where I still have some willpower stored up and, minimum number of distractions. And then practice has to be very short, very intense, very focused, right? Because it always gets in the way. And so, by the way, and then this chapter is kind of like, okay, are we going to actually integrate some of these concepts, some of these bagpipe freedom related concepts into our bagpiping life? Okay. And the answer is yes, but you have to be thoughtful about how you do it. And you have to be short and sweet. And you have to start, today. Just start doing some of this stuff today.
Yeah.
For a very short period of time, though. Like very short.
Right. Yeah, I think I can imagine at least what would be hard for me. I will sort of, in an unexamined way, naturally assume that, like, if I'm going to do bagpipe freedom stuff, then I have to do the whole book right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like all the phases.
No.
I have to remind myself, like, no, just what one thing am I going to work on today?
Yeah.
A conscious effort on my part, at least.
And we talk about it a lot in the book, right? We talk about it a lot in the book, and I don't know if we talk about it in this specific chapter or not, but the leverage is from the earlier the step of bagpipe freedom process, the more leverage you get. It's so important. So most of us have lived our whole piping careers fixated on embellishment quality and expression quality.
Yeah.
But that's where pipers have the least amount of leverage. Okay. The most leverage is way down at the bottom. And you might recall, even before we start the freedom phases, we talk about immersion. That's where you get the most leverage. Even if it is boat season, can you play some bagpipe music on the boat and just be soaking in the music? Or can you be listening to, what's Gary West's new show called?
Enjoy Your Piping.
Yeah. Can you be listening to that while you're on the boat? Yeah, you could be, you could. Most of us could live stream the worlds from the boat, right? Do that. Be soaking it in, be getting the immersion. Turn on Me and Jim, when you're driving around in the car. And just be thinking about piping and immersing yourself in it and asking those questions. Yeah, like, how does the gold medal qualification thing work? And figuring that out and thinking about it. Who are the top players? What is coming up? Let's check out this YouTube video. Be doing that immersion. That's so high leverage, especially for beginners and intermediates who haven't been immersing themselves in it their whole lives like I have. I can get away with a month of immersing myself in other stuff and probably still, have a lot of bagpipe knowledge and background and thought. But if you're new to it, like the immersion, that's the highest leverage. The expression, think about how much expression you're going to understand innately with more immersion, right? We don't need Bob Worrell to teach us expression as much as we need immersion to understand what Bob's talking about when he brings it up. You know what I mean? Something like that. I'm just using Bob as an example because I remember a recent awesome workshop he did about expression. But I also remember thinking to myself, if you're a beginner, this would go over your head unless you've listened to a lot of bagpipe music and where some of that stuff where it really starts to make sense. So remember, that's where the most leverage is. Okay. The high end stuff is the most fun to talk about. But the immersion is the most important thing. Because it's more important than anything. It's even more important than clapping the rhythms. We have to kind of understand what it is that we're trying to achieve.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah, but then from a technical standpoint, when it comes down to practicing, unless you're really clear on that rhythm, do a little bit of rhythm every day for about 5 minutes. You can do it you could do it with a pair of drumsticks. You could clap your hands. You could just tap on the desk. And then you just, do some rhythm exercises with a metronome. Practice your sight reading of rhythms, practice your swing, practice your, A-lap, ASAP, or whatever, be getting those rhythms right, be getting clear, try different rhythms, do funky stuff. Start to learn just how basic and simple and straightforward all the different rhythmic patterns are. That gives you so much leverage if you understand how to groove. It makes the rest so easy. So just do 5 minutes of that. That's how you get started, Jim. Okay, buddy? You can do this.
Okay. Yeah, it's encouraging to me that that this comes up multiple times in Finding Bagpipe Freedom, and that you bring it up here in the podcast regularly and elsewhere. That the idea of practice being short, and there's this part here in this chapter where you say a lot of people who you encounter in this situation, it's like we agree with you in terms of like the concepts and ideas that you're teaching. We get it, we agree.
Yeah,
But
we get
we're
it,
sure that
Andrew.
we are the exception because we're time poor, something
Yeah.
like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I can't,
Well, and
Um,
to be fair, when I was a kid and I was just like playing bagpipes all the time, I
mhm,
was not time poor, man. It's a huge advantage.
yeah,
I think that's probably the main reason kids learn so fast is that that's all they have to do is learn today.
mhm,
You and I, we have other things we got to do. We got to pay the bills. Got to make sure
yeah,
the kids stay alive.
yeah.
Got to
Make
help
sure they stay alive
the
and
wife
piping.
with the dishes and,
Mhm,
all that stuff. We got to help out around the house and we have a social life and,
mhm,
we want to try and get the exercise in. And so now it's like, geez. And so I get it. I don't actually get it piping wise, because I got the really hard stuff out of the way when I was a kid, when I had tons of time. But you can just look at anything else in your life that you desire to do now as an adult. And it's like, yikes, how am I going to fit this in?
yeah. But you
But
did
it's about
point.
leverage, Jim. So
Mm,
leverage is, I don't think we talk about leverage specifically in the book, but that's what this is. Leverage means you put $10 in and you get $100 out.
and that's what
Leverage,
immersion
right?
will do for you.
Yeah, give me a lever long enough and I'll move the world. That kind
Mm,
of thing. The freedom process is a great way to leverage your time. It really is,
yeah.
right? Practicing expression doesn't give you leverage. It might improve one tune, but it doesn't improve all the tunes you'll ever play necessarily. You know what I mean? Where it's like, ooh, you got to hold the F in the second phrase there.
Mhm,
Hopefully everyone can see that's one thing that's going to benefit one specific tune, right?
right.
That's not leveraged. You're putting $100 in and hopefully getting $100 out for that one tune only. But if we can get just great at the big picture concepts, that's leverage. That's going to improve every tune you ever play moving forward. So
Mm,
do that, devote some time to that.
yeah.
Get that right. Okay. And then we can do the expression later if and when we have time.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, sorry, I keep derailing this, Jim. Sorry.
No, this is exactly the point, and this is what I find encouraging, because like I don't want it to sound like I'm being discouraging, but it's almost like a reality check that can be painful at first, but ends up being giving a lot of gifts later, which is that. And I was just talking about this with my wife last night too. We were talking about how we just feel so busy all the time,
Yes.
and so. And we are, to be fair, but isn't everybody? And it's like we can think of times in our lives when we were less busy, but we thought we were just as busy,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, if that remains true, then I could probably get more busy than I am now. And I would look back on now and be like, huh, I thought I was busy then, And you say here in this chapter, that's not a unique problem.
No.
Everybody has this challenge. And that's the part
Yes.
where I'm like, that's a painful reality check, maybe partly because my ego, I think there's something tied into being busy that makes me feel important. And so if
Yes.
somebody says to me, you're no more busy than somebody else, that maybe is a little bit painful for a second. But then once that pain passes, then I go, oh, and Andrew Douglas is saying that even with how busy big important me is, I can listen to bagpipes on the way to work, and I can have a
And the
5-minute
heartbreaking
practice
thing.
session.
Yeah. And here's the heartbreaking thing. And I think it's related to the topic of leverage.
Mm,
The heartbreaking thing is it's not the busyness that's the problem.
mm.
It's the lack of reward.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So if I busted my ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I busted my ass to, I don't know, just pick a thing. But let's say I busted my ass to work out really hard. Okay. And then at the end of busting my ass, I looked great and I felt great and everything's going great. And I have a plan to sustain it going into the future. Are you upset about the busyness that caused?
Like, not at all. So worth
Not
it.
at all. Right. And that's because you got the results that you were looking for. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that you toil, and you toil and you toil to get the light and shade right, to hold the F, to get all the embellishments right, even though you really don't, right? Because you're not in the position to do that, but you're working on the embellishments and the expression, the embellishments and the expression. And what happens to your pipe band at the end of the year? You get the upgrade, don't you?
Hmm.
No, You
Nope.
don't. You struggled all year and you didn't get it. And that sucks. And that's
Yeah.
lame. And it's not even really about the prize. I shouldn't have used that. You don't feel the improvement, do you? Admit it.
Right.
Not you, Jim, but just world. Dear world, admit it. You did all the work and you didn't see any progress. You did all the
And
work
that's
and you didn't see any progress.
yeah.
Here's another one that might happen. Maybe you do all the work and then you end up getting cut all year because you're not at the standard of the rest of the group,
Yeah.
right? That's no good. It doesn't work. And guess what you're going to do next year? You're going to
The
do the same
same
thing
thing.
again. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to do the same thing again. You're just going to try harder doing the same thing again instead of figuring out what the true foundations of these skills are and leveraging your time doing those things. The rhythm is the foundation. It's the cause of great fingerwork success or great fingerwork failure, whether you like it or not. The rhythm is at the root of it all. What is a crossing noise? It's things not being timed correctly.
Right. It's
What a grace note that happens at the wrong time that's not synchronized to the note change. That's rhythm, right? Grace notes that are too big, covering things up. The size of the grace note, that's the duration. That's a rhythm word. Expression is literally, like bagpipe expression is literally tweaking the basic rules of rhythm to achieve a certain effect. So if you don't have the basic rules of rhythm down, how are you supposed to tweak it, bro? You're not, right? So anyway, it's not the busyness that bothers us. And you don't have a lack of time, right? You have a lack of time for nonsense.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which is what 98% of bagpipers do 98% of the time. You don't, seriously, Jim, right? I have extra time in the day, but not for bull crap. I'd love to spend extra time if I had confidence that I was going to see the desired result from applying my time.
I excuse me, I lived this with bagpiping just this weekend where not the end of this week, but the end of the following week, I have a kind of big gig that I'm going to be playing 3 nights in a row. And I need to be able to play for maybe 20, 30 minutes without stopping. And I'm not like physically in prime bagpiping shape right now. And so aware of that, I'm like, oh, I better buckle down and kind of start, kind of building that up a little bit in the lead up to it. And so for about a week, I'd been just getting my pipes out. And I knew it every time I got them out. I thought, I'm not practicing right now. I'm just BSing around. Like I could hear Andrew Douglas's voice in my head, telling me like, I'm not actually practicing. And and finally on Sunday, I was feeling pretty discouraged because I still felt like my bagpipes were a vacuum sucking air out of my body. And I wasn't getting up into that spot where there's some resistance from the instrument and I could actually play, Just felt like I was struggling along. I don't think it helped that it's super hot right now. And so I was just exhausted every time I went outside to play. But I thought, that's it. No, I'm going to actually take a few minutes to do a bagpipe freedom thing. And what I did is I went through and checked the hemp on all the joints on my bagpipes. Everything was a little bit loose. Nothing was horribly loose, but everything was a little bit loose. And once I had stuff apart, I recalibrated my reeds, which didn't take long because they were already pretty close, but I just got them zeroed in a little better. And when I struck in, Andrew, I'll tell you what, I went inside.
They feel better.
I felt so much better. I played for a while, played way better than I had been before. And I went inside and I told Rachel, I told my wife, I said, I'm back, baby.
I'm back.
I just felt so much better,
Kung Fu.
Made a huge difference. Yeah, I know Kung Fu. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, but a few minutes made a huge difference. And I don't regret those few minutes at all. What I do regret is the maybe hours, maybe an hour total of time that I wasted in the week prior messing around on my bagpipes without having spent those few minutes to make them sound better.
$10 in, right? So hemping your pipes, it sucks a little bit. I get it. $10 in, but then how did you feel?
Huge difference.
You get way more than $10 out, right? Like now you don't want to stab your eyeballs out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was worth it.
And I took my pipes to work yesterday and played during my lunch break, and I think they sounded great and it was fun, It's still paying dividends. Those few minutes are still paying dividends to me right now.
Yes. Leverage, right? You do a little bit to get a lot. Those are the activities we want to engage in. You want to be doing the 20% of things that gets you the 80% of results.
Now, there's a great film, an amazing film
Karate Kid.
Tommy. I was going to say Tommy Boy. Karate Kid.
It is a great film. Yeah.
And in the wonderful, amazingly beautifully written film Tommy Boy, there's a part toward
Fat
the end
guy
where the main
in a
character,
little coat. Hang on, sorry to interrupt.
classic.
Fat guy in a little coat.
Let's see, it was the auto manufacturer to whom Tommy is trying to sell. There's something about how he smells, the Chris Farley character at that point. And he says, "It's a car air freshener, sir." And the guy he's talking to says, "Good. First step is identifying it. Next step is washing it off."
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So that bit of wisdom is the experience of identifying that there's an issue, right? When I was wasting my time last week playing, it's like I was failing over and over again. And I had to finally acknowledge, look, I'm failing right now. That's the first step, recognizing it. Next step was washing it off, which was, in my case, addressing the loose hemp and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So in this chapter, you have a whole section about the value of failure. If we can't see there's a problem, of course we can't address it. So riff on failure for me, Andrew. Why would I want to fail? That doesn't sound nice.
Yeah. Well, the identification of the problem is a big problem. Like, example, you might be able to look back to when you were a beginner and your instructor was like, "Hey, get rid of that crossing noise there." Now, the instructor knows exactly what that is and they can easily hear it and it's no big deal. But to the beginner, oftentimes they can't hear it yet.
Yeah, don't even hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is step one, right? It's unconscious incompetence. We need to get to the conscious incompetence stage. And how do you do that? That's very tricky. And by the way, you're not going to do that by focusing more on expression. What are you going to do? You got to go back to the beginning. Immersion, right? Practice more. And by practice, I mean practice, not practice. I mean practice, right? But then eventually it'll start to click and you'll be like, crossing noise. Got it. Okay. Now I can hear it. Now you can hear when they're happening. And that could be a discouraging moment. But the earlier in the learning process that you can get the hang of hearing it, the better. So then you identify the problem and then you dig into it. So you're right there in terms of identification of the problem is a big thing. You had the classic one. When you're playing your pipes, the problem is really simple. It's either I'm comfortable or I'm not. Right? Occasionally you're comfortable, but your pipes just aren't locking in. So that would be another way of identifying the problem. But as soon as you have that, then you know it's time to look backwards and ensure that the foundation is built properly for your instrument.
One challenge there, of course, is that in terms of the feeling of what it feels like when your bagpipe is properly set up and you're playing it and, as you ought to be, maybe you might say, one challenge there is until you've experienced that, just like a beginner having a hard time hearing crossing noises, until you've felt what that feels like, it can be hard to know if you're there or not. I remember for years, probably, playing uncomfortably and not knowing that it could be better. And a lot of factors had to come together to make it so I could realize, I don't have to be busting my gut on a terrible read and stuff like that, But now that I've experienced it, I'm chasing it. And so when I don't have it, I go, why do I feel so terrible right now,
Yeah, that's where a good teacher would be handy, right?
Yeah.
So a good teacher would be looking out for these warning signs. Like any sign that my student is struggling, we want to stop and we want to figure out what the issue is. We would go backwards and we'd work through that. Notice that to be a good teacher in that case, it doesn't mean I have to have won 3 gold medals. What's really useful is that I'm in the room and that I'm looking for those most basic warning signs. So you could do that with a mentor. You don't need Skype lessons with a 47-time world champion. As a matter of fact, that probably wouldn't do it, would it? Just having somebody in the room would be probably pretty valuable there. Or at least some sort of like at the dojo, we do our best with video recordings and people will send them in. Hey, I'm blowing my drones. What do you guys think? And usually we can get to the bottom of what some of the issues are. Yeah. But
you do have a kind of a formula in this chapter that I like quite a bit for the value of sort of improvement based upon observations. And it is simply embrace failure, get better. Try to avoid failure, go nowhere.
Yes. You either win or you learn, Jim.
I like it. Succinct. Beautiful.
It's very nauseating. But that's just it, right? And I feel like you learn a lot more than you win. But yeah, there's no losing if you have the right mindset. So either everything's going to go great. And by the way, that does happen every now and then. But most of the time, things go suboptimally.
Hmm.
And then you just sort of say, okay, that went suboptimally. What do we need to do to address that? And the more often and the more regularly and the more routinely you can have that sort of stoic attitude where, okay, today I'm going to play and either it's going to go great or more likely there's going to be things I need to address. And so I'll work on addressing those things, right? That's a healthy attitude, I think.
Yeah.
All you can do is do your best, and then you do your best and then you make adjustments.
Mm.
It's the way that it all works, right? It's like, oh, maybe that'll work. Nope, that didn't. I tested that against reality and that was not the case. Okay, maybe this will work. Okay, maybe this will work. All right, continuing to that try, fail, adjust loop, right?
Yeah, that comes up in this chapter as well.
Right,
You're
exactly.
only
So,
limited by how many times you can try, fail, adjust.
exactly right. And then you get good at that. And then, but the point I was trying to make is it doesn't take long before the failures are typically very small and not catastrophic. If you can stay that course and just continue to do that, it doesn't take long before any failures are kind of small. Like, oh, I missed the F doubling again in the fourth part. All right, cool. That's not like the end of it's not like, oh, the clamp of my Ross canister bag blew out the back. We can usually avoid those
Yeah.
catastrophic things quite easily once we're in the zone and once we're sort of thinking about things in the right way.
I don't want to seem like I'm trying to act wisdomous or anything like that. That's not, I don't think I am in any way. But you're mentioned
very wise,
this,
Jim.
You
I
do
have
a
like
beard
14
these days,
children.
so.
If you have 14 children, you're still living. That means you
I'm
must
still
be wise.
alive.
Yeah, you must have some wisdom in there.
They have a wonderful mother. That's the secret. But
See, it was very wise of you to say. It was very wise
that
of you
was
to react
wise,
to
wasn't
that.
it? Yeah.
With that, see.
But you mentioned sort of the stoic approach to like, I'm going to try a thing and see what happens, and it might not go the way I want it to. There's right toward the beginning of one of the middle notebooks from Marcus Aurelius, he talks about exactly that, about how like you should head out with an intention, but always have a caveat that if it can work out, because you should expect that there's going to be problems, and that way you can work with it. And the metaphor he uses there, I like so much. I feel like it hits home for a lot of things, including bagpiping, is of a fire. He talks about how like a fire that's pretty small, any sort of even fuel that can be burnt that's too big that gets thrown on that fire will quench it, will put it out. But if a roaring fire is huge enough, it doesn't matter what you throw into that fire, it's going to turn everything into fuel. And, I feel like I go through phases in my life where I do not feel like a roaring fire at all. I feel very fragile and like anything is going to tip me over,
Yeah.
But I want to feel like a roaring fire. And especially with my bagpiping, I've had little glimpses of that where I'm like in reasonably good shape and a gig comes along or something. And it's like, I'm ready for that. Absolutely. Let's go. Just like feeling ready for anything. That's a great feeling.
I feel like that's give or take, with the obvious understanding that it's not exactly like that, but that's give or take the way that I feel. And then that's the way that I can do things. For example, if someone throws a really hard bagpipe tune at me, I'll say, okay, cool. That looks really hard, but let's dive in. Let's see what we can get. And it wouldn't be a big deal. Whereas for some people, maybe it would be a showstopper.
Yeah.
I also feel like if I decided to get back into solo playing again, I would have a plan to exercise that, and I wouldn't be afraid of it. There'd be nothing sort of standing in the way. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking, like you said, the fire is big enough that anything you throw at it, can be integrated. It's not gonna quench the fire.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like some of the tools that are provided here in the book and elsewhere on Dojo help with precisely that. And one that comes easily to mind is tune simplification, where it's like, and part of that's the attitude adjustment, where I can just tell myself, like, it's still a real song, even if I simplify it. That keeps the metaphorical fire, strong. So then when that tune comes to me, it's fuel,
But Jim, it's something the establishment doesn't want you to know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's still music, even without the doublings.
Yeah.
It's still music. Now, I get it. Like, it might not be as developed as you want the music to be, but for starters, it's great.
Yeah.
For starters, it's great. If someone were to say, Andrew, will you please take over our grade 5 band, right? And I would say, and we'll do anything you say. I know exactly what I would say, which is, we're going to play this minimally viable simplified setting until you're playing it well. And then we will integrate embellishments gradually after that for every single player in the band. And that's just what we would do. And it wouldn't take that long to get all of our members playing an embellished setting pretty well. But that's not how we're going to start. Because if you start that way, it'll be forever before anyone can play the embellished setting well. Because it's just obvious.
You know, the recent chapter that we did.
It's like asking a baby to like skip the step of learning to roll over, skip crawling, and let's just start with running.
Yeah.
Yep, let's do that because that makes sense. Or reading, it's like let's just start with the Shakespeare.
Right. You could have people making sounds, even if they had a basic foundation of how to sound out words, but the words wouldn't be meaning anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, Jim. You're exactly correct. Even if you could sound out the words, which by the way, kids couldn't yet probably most of those words because that's, not what they're used to reading. And then even if they could, which they can't, but even if they could, it would only be noises. It wouldn't have meaning yet. And how do you develop that? Well, it starts with the basics. The little picture book. It's like, then Scar murdered Simba's dad, and it's
that's how you start kids on books right
Dad,
there. Yeah.
What's murder? Well, son. But we got to get into before Shakespeare is going to make a lot of sense. We got to do the basics. We got to.
I feel like there's got to be a joke in here somewhere.
Sometimes there's a jealous uncle, son, and
and then remember that was Scar's brother, and then your little kid's brother walks through the room, right? Just sow those seeds of problematic relationships
keep
later.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye out on your siblings because some of them might be jealous if you succeed.
Right.
And may scores of angels sing thee to thy sleep.
Yeah, and just so you know, you're my very favorite.
Yes, you're my favorite. And I intend to shun your other siblings. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. But it takes a while to get to that point where the things you read can be translated into abstractions that have great worth.
Yeah. Now, you're probably familiar with this idea that there's a psychological value to creating checklists that have achievable tasks on them because there's a momentum you build up when you can check off a thing. Brush your teeth. I brushed my teeth, and you feel good about that. And then you get to the things you don't really want to do and you feel like you can do them. I wonder.
Yeah, sort of. Yep. I think so.
I might be thinking about this specifically because we just finished chapter 11, which was about pipe bands. And your example of if you hypothetically were to take over a grade 5 band, here's what you would do, And we were just barely talking about how if we've been doing the same thing all year and not feeling like we've improved, how discouraging that can be. And then we do it again the next year and the next year and the next year.
I think that's the problem.
I think I'm seeing what you mean.
That's the big problem. Yeah. I think that's the big problem is we've been doing this, but you hit the plateau a long time ago.
Yeah. And it just
and that's why you feel you don't have the time you need to work on your piping. You do have the time, but you don't have time to waste.
Yeah.
Which is what the last 10 years has been because you've been doing the wrong things.
Well, that strikes me as really valuable.
Truth hurts, but yeah.
It does hurt. You're absolutely right. But I'm thinking to myself, this is, throwing all these analogies into a bucket and shaking it up, Maybe I've got a kid who can kind of walk, but it's we're going to go back to crawling and they're going to feel great about crawling and they're going to progress back to walking in very quickly, but they're going to feel successful for reaching walking and they're going to walk better than they did before. Terrible choice on my part to use that analogy.
No, but by the way, both of my kids did that. I'm sure yours did too.
Yeah.
So they do a little bit of walking.
Yep.
They do a little bit of walking, but without having to be asked, they go back to crawling for a while, and it's why isn't my kid walking? I know they can do it,
but it's 2 steps. Yeah.
Yeah. But they do that naturally. There's no ego wrapped up in walking when they're not really ready yet. It's oh man, there's something I want across the room. Crawling is the most efficient way to get there. And you'll naturally sort of revert to the most efficient way. Yeah. I've seen that. I think that derails your point, Jim. Sorry.
That absolutely. That's exactly the point I was going for. Yeah. I'm wondering if that's exactly the experience we would have as players individually and as pipe bands. If we feel like we've plateaued, it can feel like going backwards, so we don't want to do it. But what if we took just this year to go back? Then at the end of this year, we probably would be back to where we were before we went back, but we'd be there way better. Am I making that so messy that it doesn't make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a little messy. I mean, it's really not realistic. I don't know if it's realistically fun to just stop everything that you're doing and go back.
Mhm.
But it's one option.
But I'm
I
thinking
think,
like if it pays dividends quickly, that we can see that improvement at the end of that 1 year, then that's going to feel great,
yep, for sure. I think quitting cold turkey and going back, I don't even think it would take a year.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I think can you find 3 months to dig deep and take a big chunk out of it? I think that would be good. But at some point, we have to integrate these good habits into our daily life. So that's the other option, is you could try the gradual, if you're going to quit smoking, you could try the gradual weaning method, or you could try the cold turkey method.
Yeah.
I think it sort of depends.
And it might be the case, like you say, it might take way less than a year, because I'm just thinking like, man, if I go back to clapping rhythms, I say, I should be doing that all the time anyway. But if I go back to that, then I might actually get in a pretty good spot with it rather quickly. And then that might be like those simple checklist items where I go, that actually went really great. On to phase 2, that could really feel good.
Bagpipe maintenance is a perfect example. I mean, if you pick your pipes up for the first time in 2 months, then the bagpipe maintenance process could take a while. Could take 20, 25 minutes. You got to rehemp, you got to maybe season your pipes, whatever. You got to double check everything. You got to calibrate the drone reeds again. Everything's kind of like wonky, right? And then the next day you pick the pipes up. Well, it's gone down, hasn't it? From 25 minutes to maybe 10 minutes. Maybe calibration wasn't quite perfect yesterday. So you got to tweak that, that's not quite right. And maybe you made the hemp too tight on a couple of joints yesterday. So yeah, it still takes 10 minutes on day 2. But then on day 3, now you're down to 5 or 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then by day 4 or 5 and so on to infinity, you really can do your bagpipe maintenance in like under 60 seconds a day, which is exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Especially during peak season. It's like, that's a little bit tight, quick wrap of hemp. Now I'm good to go. Oh, the calibration, maybe I remember yesterday, maybe it could be ever so slightly tweaked. So you could ever so slightly tweak it or whatever. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like so easy. And then you go through your mental checklist and then you can play. Yeah.
There are machines, I'm thinking flywheels maybe. They're like, there's a kind of a classification of simple machines that there's some concept here. I'm not an engineer, but where it's once you get it up to working capacity, a small amount of energy will keep it there. Yes. But if it stops entirely, it takes a lot of energy to get going again. I feel like that kind of thing is really applicable in piping too. Just a little bit can keep you there.
Yep. A little bit can keep you there. And that's what you want to do. And by the way, so I was talking about bagpipe maintenance there. Okay. But the same thing could go for other things. For example, a little bit of practice at the dojo as part of the tuning algorithm course. We've got what is it? It's a 20-day tuning training plan that has just very simple tuning tasks that take 5 minutes or less to do each day. So some of those activities, man, if you could spare 5 minutes before you get on to what you would normally do and just do those things, it's going to work. It's going to be fine. It's kind of like checking off the checklist. And the same, it's like, man, clap the rhythms you're going to be playing today. Clap them, make sure you're super clear. Just do that for a few minutes before you would go on with what you would normally do. And you'd be surprised how quickly your fluency with rhythm, gets awesome. And by the way, the magic will happen there too. So one day you'll be practicing, you'll be doing your drudgery, your 5 minutes of rhythm, but then something will click for you and you'll be like, huh. You know what I mean? You ever had that moment?
Oh yeah.
Where you're
Love those moments.
Where you're like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And then you explore it some more and you end up doing rhythm for more than 5 minutes and you have an explosion of progress of some kind. And it's hard to explain exactly what that's going to be. I think it's probably different for everybody. The iconic moment for me, I remember exactly where I was. I was under the stage at St. Andrews College, just playing. I was already at like a really high grade 1 level. It was dark, very few lights on. It was like in the prop room. I remember the exact moment. But then I had this moment where I was like, huh, what if I attach all of my G grace notes to the moment that my foot hits the floor? Like, what if I attach those? That's an interesting idea. Let me try that. And I just remember it being an incredible breakthrough. Incredible. And it's all I ever do now. And obviously, right? But I could even say that to you and you're like, that's really interesting, but it will click in your mind. Suddenly it becomes your idea.
Yeah.
And then, suddenly your level of play just skyrockets. For me, my level of play wouldn't skyrocket audibly. The standard audience member might not have been able to tell the difference, except for I was able to play with far less effort and way more smoothness and way more efficiently. I missed way fewer embellishments from then for the rest of time because of that little thing that clicked. But if you think about it, what did I do there? I had a realization about something that's pretty basic, which is to connect the moment that your foot hits the ground, right, to your actual fingers so that they're connected. That's a rhythmic thing. That's rhythmic accuracy.
Yeah. And so it's pretty basic, and you were pretty high level, and yet there was something about how it sunk in for you personally in that moment that was profound.
Yeah. Yep.
It's interesting to think about the fact that you were there. You'd been there. By there, I mean you were playing your pipes. You were thinking about these things. I wonder if maybe it's not the same thing, but I remember hearing Ross Ainsley once talk about how the way that he comes up with his music, and he described it as being something like he's just always got his antennas up. And as long as his antennas are always up, he's going to catch those ideas as they go by. And I wonder if it's like, well, you're not going to have those breakthrough experiences if you're not immersing yourself, if you're not listening to, playing, etc. bagpipes. If you're there playing, then when that idea comes, you're not going to miss it. Maybe if you hadn't been playing that night, Andrew, the idea, I'm talking like this ethereal world where the idea of G grace notes goes floating by, and you weren't playing in that moment, and so you missed it. Yeah. You were playing, so you got it.
It's about being creative and having ideas, right? Where a lot of us are looking to be told what to do. That's never been the case for me. Like I'm always, I'm always looking for tips and advice, but there's a big difference between like advice and feedback and encouragement and being told what to do. There's the yin and the yang. There's the Jedi and the dark side of the Force, right? The dark side of the Force is like, time to learn a P-Brock. Here's how you play the ground. That's I mean,
the
look,
Sith approach.
so that's the Sith, like here's how you need to play the ground. So there's here's how to play the ground, and then there's here's how to play the ground. You know what I'm saying, Jim?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So there's one way of playing the ground, which is here's a variety of things to think about as you construct how you're going to play it. That's good, right? And then it's like, no, that's wrong. This is how you're going to play the ground. No, correct that. No, this note needs to be shorter. With like, there's no discussion and there's no creativity, and that's how you do it. Watch out for those people. Run the other way. Yeah. And for God's sakes. No, I'm not going to say the thing I was about to say. Nope. See,
look at you.
Wisdom
you thought better
there,
of it. Yeah.
Yep. I just censored myself, which is too bad because,
it was a spicy one, huh?
I feel strongly that the creativity is the secret ingredient in creativity and ideas and solving problems. And I think the big problem is, how do we get our creative ideas manifested into the real world? How do we do that? That's the big problem. That's the human fascination, isn't it? Like, how do I take this idea that I have and make it a real thing? Yeah.
And bagpipes can be the vehicle.
Yeah, it can be. Right. But then and then when you're teaching bagpipes, it's like, what is the teacher trying to do? Are they trying to teach you to be able to manifest your own ideas? Or are they just trying to replicate? I don't know. What are they trying to replicate? Yeah. Themselves or something.
Right. Get their ideas to come out of your bagpipes.
Yeah. Nope. And I've just never allowed that. So when I did a bagpipe lesson, I'm always just integrating what I'm being taught into my own framework, and I'm allowing it to inform my own ideas. Yeah. And some of my teachers were great teachers that fostered that. And some of my teachers didn't enjoy it that much because they had other ideas. Yeah. Crazy. I don't know. I'm very, what do you call it? Irreverent or something.
Irreverent, unmanageable.
Yeah. But I'm always super grateful and interested in learning and getting the feedback. My lessons with everybody were incredible. I learned a ton. I just soak it up. You soak it up like a sponge. But it's not for replication, right? It's for integration into your own system of ideas and thoughts.
Right.
Like that's what art is all about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're picking up skill sets or almost like tools that you can then apply to your own creative process.
For me, that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So this chapter, you kind of end the chapter by kind of doing a review of the book in a lot of ways. Just open your mind to escape bagpipe captivity, and achieve freedom. And the way you do that is, here's your fundamentals. Here's how to set up a practice session. Turn off distractions, all that kind of stuff. You kind of give a quick little run through of everything we've read up to this point in the book.
Do all that stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to see it all put. It's so succinct. I only have an electronic copy of the book, so I'm not sure how many chapters, or excuse me, how many pages that summary fits onto, but I suspect it's no more than 3. It's pretty, and it could be even shorter. It's a pretty.
Are you talking about the conclusion? Are you talking about the conclusion proper, or are you talking about the end of the chapter?
I was looking at the end of the chapter. I was thinking.
Oh no, it's not even. It's less than a page.
Less than a page, even. Oh, there you go.
Well, and then Jim, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't just cover the conclusion here,
Why
which
not?
is only a page and a half, which begins with this quote:
Mm-hmm.
"Adapt what is useful, Jim. Reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own." I feel like that's very poignant and very on point.
Sounds like exactly what we were talking about.
That's the great martial artist and philosopher Bruce Lee, right there.
Bruce the Lee himself.
Yeah, do the things that are useful. How useful is a lot of the stuff that you hear?
Yeah.
If it's not useful, don't worry about it. And then, what are the things that are useful, and do more of those things. It's like, oh, when I do that, I actually see the great results. Yeah.
But we often spend a lot of time doing things that are actually useless, things that are not giving us results, but we keep doing them because for some reason we think we should, or because we learned how to do that thing, so we keep doing that thing.
Yeah, man.
And add what is specifically your own. That's the beautiful part, right? That's the creativity that you're talking about.
Here's the word leverage. Just popped right out at me. By the way, like any other mastery-oriented pursuit. And what are we mastering? A personal commitment to take piping seriously and work hard to achieve personal excellence is not just a fun hobby to fill the time. And we talked about how we don't have that much time to waste, do we? So if we're going to fill our time, it has to be meaningful. So it's a pastime we can leverage to literally improve ourselves. A lens we can use to evaluate the world inside and outside of us. There's the inside world, and then there's the outside world, and there's a relationship there. And we don't ever really know what it is. But like bagpiping is something that we can use to really meaningfully explore that relationship. And then it can inform lots of other things. I mean, I guess I'm a special case because I'm bagpipe obsessed, but for me, it does. It's like you learn a lot of lessons, don't you?
Yeah.
By immersing yourself in a mastery-oriented pursuit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the conclusion does a lot of summarizing, blah, 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 blah. And there you go. That's Finding Bagpipe Freedom, everybody.
So if you want to find freedom with the bagpipes, there's your manual for how to do it. It's not a terribly long book. It's consumable. You can get through that.
Oh, yeah. It's not a long book. It comes with the audio book if you'd like. If you go to pipersdojo.com, Jim, did you know this? You can purchase Finding Bagpipe Freedom, the book, for free if you're willing to pay the shipping.
You can purchase it for $0?
Free, just pay shipping. And the shipping, I think it's $10. Because we kind of have to cover, all of our bases and the processing and everything. But
if I remember right, too, I'm almost positive that my audiobook copy is on Audible. And
it is on Audible.
But I think, was there also a way to download it on the website? If someone wanted
you
to
can
get
it on Audible and you can get it on Kindle. And then you can get the hard copy.
Yeah. Well, I can tell
we're
you
looking at formatting the book as an Amazon, the Amazon printable kind of thing.
Oh, gotcha.
Someday we'll do that so you can buy the book on Amazon too. Right now, in order to set it up to buy the physical copy on Amazon, you'd have to ship books to them to warehouse and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, we're not going to do that.
Not going to do that.
No, we might do it someday, but Amazon will also print on demand for you, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So we'll probably end up setting that up.
Well, a nod to you, Andrew, for putting together, I think anybody to put together any kind of book, that's a feat. And so good on you. I've sure been enjoying it. And to Camille as well. I suspect that there's a lot of color and value to what she added to the book, though it's not always obvious
sure.
who wrote what. Knowing
Yeah, well,
that she's a delightful person makes me think a lot of the delightful parts of this book might have come from her.
Yeah, well, I mean, Camille just did big edits, so I wrote the book, but then, she really forged it into something that was readable and enjoyable and not too dark. There's a lost first half of the introduction.
Oh, really?
That we still have and laugh about, but it was just like way too aggressive. Like, bro, you gotta chill out. But yeah, it was pretty fun. That was sort of a COVID project, right? Well, we're locked in our homes and we may be here forever. So I always wanted to write a book. Let's write a book. It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Very rewarding experience.
Well, good for you. I think I just worked through a whole lot of bags of Doritos during my lockdown. So we both accomplished things, Andrew. Really. I think we both accomplished things.
Hey, everybody. Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.